What's up, man? I'm super pumped to have you, man. I first found out about you through Aubrey, listening to his show, and as an avid believer in the power of cannabis, definitely something that completely changed and altered my life. I'd love to have smarter people talk about it than just my advocacy for the product. So I figure I'll let you share a little bit about what all you're into and what we're chatting about.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm so glad you had me on, Matt. I mean, when you reached out, I was like, this is the exact type of stuff I love doing. Of course, having two podcasts myself, like when anyone asks me to podcast, I'm like, hell yes. It is one of my favorite things in the world. And what I found is that throughout my own life, I found a love for cannabis, but like many people listening, could I imagine resonate with, I never knew how much was too much. I never understood that you can numb out emotions with it. Like the cannabis world is very apt on saying, like some sacred cow type stuff, which is you can't get addicted to it.
Right.
It's very safe, which those things are not inherently untrue. It's just that they're not the full story, and I think that a lot of people hear that and their negative ego like clings onto it and goes, yeah, just use as much of it as you can because you can't get addicted. You already heard that, right? And
Right. No negative side effects, as if that's the only one that there is.
Yeah, exactly.
Either addiction or it's great. These are the only options.
Yeah, exactly. And so for me, like what I really sought to create with Connect with Cannabis, which is the main offering we're doing right now, we're also creating a grow program that I'm so fucking stoked about. But with Connect with Cannabis is like the long lost user manual for cannabis, right? Like a lot of us interact with the plant. We find things we love about it, but sometimes we get great results one time and then undesirable, quote unquote, results the next time. Sometimes we end up, leaning on it very heavily and we're curious why or how to break that habit. And so, like, all of these things are what we talk about in the program. And we give people a system in order to use cannabis and connect with it consciously and intentionally. And what I say is it's really a tool for divination. Just like you interact with tarot or the I Ching or any of these systems, it can be a system that you can connect with to be able to tap deeper into your intuition, higher self, whatever you want to call that, right? Your own intuitive knowing is really what it comes down to. And so it's been fascinating just like figuring this stuff out in my own life and then going, well, this is coming from my heart. I want to put it out there, but I have no idea how it's going to be received. And then seeing how much positive, results I've gotten from it and positive feedback I've gotten from it. And we've had 9 groups go through the program now. People are loving it. We're certifying people to go out there and teach the system. And so it's just been a blast, man. I feel like I got to pinch myself most days to make sure I'm not dreaming.
Dude, that's really, really exciting to hear. I know, personally for me, I really never used cannabis ever really until into my early 30s.
Mm.
I was NCAA athlete with college and grew up on the just say no shit.
The Nancy Reagan approach.
Yeah, man, all the way through, and came under this pretty good idea that there was some rule that this was going to ruin my life. That's what I had been taught, and this was not to be questioned, and this is how things will go. And then as I had gone through some major physical injuries with training and loss of sport and some surgeries, I ended up leaning on cannabis a ton for pain management. It was just another option besides opiates. And what I had found with it is while it doesn't remove pain the way opiate does. It allowed me to interpret it different, as well as all that internal work, right? Like anytime I kind of immediately started looking at it as the more I had anxiety or issues being stoned, like that was the shadow work. Like that's where I'm supposed to be going and looking.
Exactly. And you said it perfect with what you were saying about how you heard that it would ruin your life. Well, who's the only one that can ruin our lives? Us at the end of the day, right? Because things happen, but it's how we view them and how much accountability and ownership we take over them that ultimately leads to either a positive or negative result in our lives. And I think that that's one of the challenges with cannabis is that many people externalize their power onto the plant. If they become anxious, right, after they interact with cannabis, it's not I'm experiencing anxiety, it's cannabis gave me anxiety.
Right.
And so like you multiply that pattern in all the different ways. Cannabis makes me lazy, cannabis makes me addicted, all these things, and it doesn't really give you any solution, because if this external thing gave you laziness or gave you anxiety, well, then the only way to remediate it is to take it out of your life completely. But at the end of the day, you're not removing the anxiety or any of these things from you. You're just removing the thing that brought it up,
Right.
And that's not inherently a bad thing. Sometimes there is a real argument for removing it out of your life. But I think for a lot of people, they fail to understand that like this plant is a plant medicine. That's why indigenous cultures have connected with it in a certain way for thousands of years. And it's only been in the last couple of hundred that we've really forgotten about these powers of cannabis. So it's actually much more of a remembering than a discovery. And it's fascinating hearing other people's stories like yourself and realizing like this is intuitive for a lot of people. And I imagine many of your listeners will be like, I've felt this, right? And so a lot of us have felt this, but like what is a system behind it that we can use to replicate desirable results every single time? And by desirable, I do not mean easy. I mean being able to come out of that experience, seeing it happening for you, realize
that's such the difference, right? Like
yeah, it is
the vocabulary and knowledge that comes from the psychedelic world. There's I even fucking hate the terminology from people anymore, like a good or bad trip. Like that's not what it is. It's not good or bad. It's an indifferent thing. Your interpretation of it is how you decide good or bad. Like you're not in physical fucking danger. Download the message.
Yes.
And then your perception of it gets to be whatever it is. And kind of applying that rule to cannabis has been really helpful for me. And now I suffer ADHD, not a shock along with anything else. And it was something, I got, diagnosed with in school and, was put on Ritalin, and I just never took it. I never cared for whatever it did. And luckily my parents were rad and like never forced it and got weird about it. And I didn't have enough behavioral issues that like I was getting kicked out of class or school. So now that I'm in my, fucking damn near 40, I find cannabis to be such a benefit for me because it tends to slow down the thunderstorm a little bit that's in my head and allows more focus to pick.
Yeah.
So that getting zoned in, I'm not using it to disconnect, right? Like that's what you're talking about with having intention behind it and having why I'm choosing to use it. Is it cool or is it a fucking, a hindrance? And so that's really, really rad to see. So when you're running these classes and the certifications for it, where did you come through and learn and put together all the criteria, I guess, and the plan?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I mix a lot of different things together because I went to school for psychology, because I've been in the coaching for a long time, and because I've done cannabis for the last 14 years in different ways that I'll get into in a second. I had this really interesting moment where I had these separate events in my life, like going to school for psychology, then getting into school for cannabis and working in the industry and providing home grow setups for people, teaching them how to home grow and things like that. And also going to soil education during that time and then getting into coaching. It was like I had these separate chapters in my life that all of a sudden just fit together. And I was like, oh, so then I was like, wow, I can interact with cannabis and teach people how to connect with it as medicine and ally, and teach them how to cultivate it, and teach them a little bit about word magic and manifestation and flipping limiting beliefs and how music plays into the human experience and how play is a big deal and all the things I've learned to be important, but I can put it in the context of cannabis being able to help them understand these things, because it does. It has for me, and it has in everyone that's gone through the program. And so for me, it's like, what are the core components of a high quality life? And how can I allow cannabis to be the tool to help people learn how to do this, not only when they're interacting with cannabis, but also be equipped with the integration tools to make this their day-to-day life, even without cannabis? Because I'm a firm believer of what Terence McKenna said, which is like, when you get the message, you can hang up the phone, at least for a little while, for you to integrate it, right? Like the idea is to make your life a psychedelic experience. That's what I'm going for. I don't only want to rely on these medicines to have moments of euphoria or peak experiences. I want that to be in my entire life. And so what I find cannabis and any plant medicine to do in different ways is to illuminate what's already possible without the shit behind it, the trauma, the limiting beliefs, the stories, right? To remind you like, oh, there's something to work for. Now I see the gold at the end of the rainbow, and now I'm more committed to the path ahead. But what happens a lot of the time is that people don't understand that before they get into these medicines. And so they're in discomfort, right? They're having a challenge in their life. They have these PEAK peak experiences with these medicines, and their brain goes, well, that thing made me feel better, and I feel like shit every day. So therefore, to feel better, I just need more of that. And that's where the dependency comes in. But it's not that you're dependent on that particular thing. It's that you're dependent on anything that's going to provide you feelings of comfort, because that's what you want when you're living in discomfort, you know? And so it's really about, like you were saying, like helping people tune in with cannabis rather than tune out, because we've just never learned this is possible. And there's so much there. I mean, it's really just so much fun to be able to experience and lead people through. And, you know, people get some amazing results, right? Like we want people to take this and be able to go use it in their lives and gain something valuable from it. What that is, who knows, right? We always say in the course is like, we know what we're going to teach you guys, but we have no idea what's going to come forth as a result of you going through this program. But we're here to support you in it and help you actually claim this in your day-to-day life, so that it's not just a goal written down on a piece of paper that gets dust on and then gets forgotten about, right? We want this to be a thing that is a ritual practice, that when you connect with this plant, you're able to get downloads. Then you're able to go through periods of sobriety where you integrate and then come back when you want the next lesson. It's really cool.
Man, it's become so common now that like everyone I see, you know, working and manifesting and trying, and whether that's using tools like mushrooms or psilocybin or cannabis or anything else, or man, even as far as tobacco, like everything has a, like I'm taking something because I want an altered state of where I currently am, from my coffee all the way to fucking the Cialis or anything else you'd fucking take throughout the day, right? Is like, for me, one of the things I'm turned on most by is performance enhancement. And so like, what can I do to enhance performance? Coming from the athletic background, like I figured out the training protocol, things like that, to accomplish what I did within sports. And then now that I'm kind of on the backside of my competitive years and looking at other stuff, like, well, how do I apply those rules that gets me good at that thing to everything else in my life? And a lot of that is removing the emotion connected to an outcome, you know, and being able to live with more awareness. And so anything that seems to give me more awareness, I find to be really performance enhancing, because it allows me to interpret data better and decide what next decisions to make. And I find cannabis and these tools to be exactly like that. But what you're saying is fucking entirely true about integration. You see it all the time, man, that people do this thing to get this spark and have this big fucking epiphany and change, and then go back to the actions that they've been doing for the last however many years, and it'll win. We fucking adapt really well to whatever stimulus we put on ourselves the most. We're fucking incredible about it. As a guy that used to be 290 fucking pounds and throwing stuff, and now doing more endurance things, my only plan of attack was show up and do it a lot. And I've managed to get fucking better at it, which is no different than business, no different than my relationship. It's showing up with an intention and an effort, and less of an expectation of what's going to come.
Yes.
No. And so that's where shit gets south on people, is when the expectation doesn't meet what happens, but you don't fucking know how it's going to go.
100%.
That's the point of it.
Yeah, it's the mystery. And here's like the big epiphany I had too, and I'm curious if you resonate with this. I realized at a certain point, and Aubrey said something similar right after I had kind of come to this answer on my own, which was like, what I realized after a while was that, to the degree that there is more mystery in my life, is a degree to which I can find more joy. When I get stuck into figuring it out, which, let's face it, none of us really know anything.
Not a fucking thing,
right?
Not a fucking clue.
Yeah.
How fucking minimal the time is I'm on this planet.
Exactly.
Compared to the giant fucking timeline.
Yeah.
Fucking Christ.
And even like,
goddamn thing.
Dude, like Pluto was a planet until it wasn't, but maybe now it is again. Like, no one really knows anything. We're all grasping on these things to give us this false sense of security. But if you go on and it's like, if you go on the other side though, and you start tuning into the fact of like, oh, I'm happy I don't know anything, because you can feel the pressure that takes off of you, because knowing this, right, hearing it and having the direct experience of it are different. So I had this idea for a while. I call them ideas.
Oh, fucking, I'm on point with you. I have tons of them.
Yeah, it's like,
I love a good idea.
Dude, they're the best. So I had this idea a while ago, but I didn't put it into action. And then I had the direct experience of it right? When I was in a plant medicine experience and I realized, oh my God, this is actually real. But then I actually had to go into my day-to-day life and realize all the points at which I was trying to quote unquote know something, right? From a program or pattern based on schooling and these kind of things where we're memorizing, regurgitating equals learning, which is not the actual case.
No.
And so like I had to go through and do this deep inner work and try to figure out like where is all this stuff rooted. And so like it's really funny you bring these things up because how they relate to integration is that for a lot of people, and myself included for a while, I had the concept of integration messed up. Where integration for me is actually where the bulk of the work happens. I'm not going to say it's the real work or that, but it's where the bulk of the work actually happens because the plant medicine experience, yeah, they might be challenging, right? They might test you, but maximum it's about 24 hours, right? If you're doing a boga, let's say. And I don't think many people are going to do a boga, but like if you're doing an experience like that, you're having that 24-hour period max, but then the rest of your life after that, right? To integrate this pattern. And so that's why I say it's where the bulk of the work happens. And it's where we get to have the fun because if we realize we don't know anything, then integration and everything that you were saying is exactly true. It's less about the outcome because you realize that whatever outcome you get to, well, that might not resonate in 6 months or even a day. You might find a new outcome. Right. So if you can just enjoy the process, which everyone says enjoy the journey, and I heard it so many times and I thought I was, but like it's this thing where until you start really experiencing it and replicating it, and plant medicines can be one of the many ways you can interact with this. It's not the only way I do it, but it is a certain flavor of ice cream that I enjoy, right? Like, so it's like, for me, the more I experienced this and had the direct experience, the more I started compounding evidence and creating correlation. And it's just been this thing where to the degree I have mystery is the degree I have more joy. And this degree I put less pressure on myself and take myself less seriously. And when I do all of that, it reconstitutes that joy. And it's just this great reciprocal loop of just giving me energy, you know? So it was cool you brought that up.
and with that integration, look, you know, as much as we're seeing this popularization of coaching and all these events and things, what I look at is, you know, people are desperate for an actual connection. The last 2 years stole a lot from people and it polarized a lot of opinions on stuff. And now since we have the technology to create lighthouses for people to say, like, this is the type of shit I'm into learning about, there is going to be all these micro worlds of where those people can actually meet up and people like yourself, these other facilitators, get a chance. And man, once I released any idea of it being competitive or like this is the right way, wrong way, and it was just like, I hope this works for you. Like everything's valid as much as it isn't valid. And I don't know that I believe anything at this point has intrinsic value. It's simply what we choose. And once that veil is fucking yanked free, then I choose whatever the fuck I want.
Yes.
And using some of these tools to illuminate that path as well as, you know, set the compass, right? Like, what are we fucking scared of? Well, that's where the growth comes. You know, or that fear to leave the job. You know, well, I don't smoke because I get this anxiety about blah, blah, blah. It's like, maybe fucking listen that you're bummed.
Maybe
you know?
feel it.
Yeah. Maybe fucking pay attention.
Yeah.
You know, alcohol does such a different response from us. It doesn't take us down a peg and like make us more responsive. There's a reason that there aren't rooms of high people taking their shirt off to fight strangers. Like you know, it just has a different fucking reaction.
Yeah.
I just always find it fascinating that what we've chose to back. And the truth is the timeline's really short.
100%, you know, and you hit it nail on the head. Like, I think the biggest challenge in society right now all goes back to this lack of connection. And it's funny because what are we told? We have a loneliness epidemic. But like I was talking about with cannabis dependency or any of these objective addictive tendencies of anything, right? Those are the results. They're not the actual problem. And we know from medicine, it's kind of like how you do anything is how you do everything. So of course, if we're looking for the symptoms with medicine and we're looking for the symptoms in terms of like, what is someone addicted to and not the root cause? Well, then we're probably not going to think of the root cause in this way also. But really, loneliness is the result of the actual problem, which is an inability to feel connected to ourselves, those we love, the important work we're doing in the world, and the world at large. That's really what it comes down to is what I believe. And again, I don't know anything, but this is just what I believe. And so it's like, it's interesting you bring that up because, you know, if we can actually tune into like, okay, well, what are the ways we can connect deeper? Well, now we're presented with some plans that we can take some action from. But if we keep looking at the results as the problem, well, then like, oh, we have this epidemic of loneliness. Well, how do we solve that? Fuck if I know, right? But if we know it's lack of connection, well, more connection. Then it becomes, how do we get more connection? Well, we can look into a myriad of different things. But I think it's really interesting you bring that up because, it's like with alcohol and cannabis, alcohol almost creates a false peg for you to step up with so that you feel as though you're ahead of where you really are. And that's why I feel alcohol becomes addicting to certain people, is because they like that false sense of confidence that makes them not feel as disempowered as they do when they're in a sober state.
Yeah,
And
of
with
course.
cannabis,
Right.
yeah, and with cannabis, it's almost the opposite, where sometimes
Yeah,
it
it
can
is.
bring you down a peg and almost like allow you to question everything, and so like that can be scary. So it's almost like the opposite poles, right? The law of polarity from hermetics. It's kind of like the opposite poles. So that's interesting to look at it that way.
Yeah, and it's been really, really a useful tool.
Yeah.
And as you're saying, like people trying to find this connection, man, and trying to find this time to reach out. I think it's a really weird thing where we feel like we have such connection at our fingertips, but they're not the same in-person thing. And it's another thing to also be around, for using overused terms now, the tribe or whatever it is you're searching for. You're fucking people, man. You're fucking brand of weirdos.
Yes.
Like at some point, you have to be able to put down the veil and let go of the I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. Why isn't this working out? Because you have to question, what does supposed to do mean and who is that for? And I think cannabis does a very good job of bringing a lot of that to light if you're willing to listen and can use it to find more of a purpose. Now, in y'all's program, do you use it for that type of meditation? For like, I know you mentioned manifestation and everything else. I'd love to hear more about with that.
Yeah, 100%. So a lot of what we're doing in the program could be described as identity work. And we're doing that through a process of first subtracting from the equation of yourself on the first half of the program, and then adding to this new space you created from subtracting from the equation of yourself in the first 6 modules. And so to give an example of like a couple of things we do with this, like there are some meditations we do and things like that, but I'll give a couple exercises that someone at home might be able to try too if they want to try this out. Because again, cannabis is not meant for everyone. Psychedelics are not meant for everyone.
Either peanuts.
Exactly.
Fuck, man, why would they play by any different rules than any other chemical compound that we run through our system? Some people doesn't fucking work for them.
Exactly. And it's funny. So like for me, one of the things that I found to be most powerful is something I call the conversation with cannabis. And this is module 2 in the program. So the first module is all about getting your house in order, right? Taking a break from cannabis. For a lot of people, this is the first time they've done that in a while. Going through a whole dieta, eating clean food, drinking clean water, getting enough sleep, relaxing throughout the week, like really starting to subtract again from the equation that's got them to this point where they're like, either cannabis isn't working right, something's not working
What
right.
amount of time would you say for most people?
Yeah. So for me, like I typically tell people whatever you can't take 3 days off of owns you. So if you start with a 3-day break per week, that's a really good spot to start, and then do your ceremony the day you come back from that break. And that's going to allow the endocannabinoid system and the CB1 receptors to be a little bit less clouded or like full, for lack of a better term, if you're a daily user, because they do get clogged after a while. And clogged isn't exactly the right term, but it's close enough. Same
works with the rest of the drug program.
Yeah.
Clogged works.
And so in that first week, we take that break, right? So for someone like, I'll go into a little bit after of like, what I did in my own process of getting clean for a while and then coming back to it when I felt like I was more self-aware. So on the second week, we do this conversation with cannabis. So now you've taken a break. You've had an experience of how cannabis works very differently when you take a break and you create intention and you create a ceremonial structure and setting from which that intention can play out within. You integrate after, right? So you've had that full experience in the first week. Now, in the second week, you're still rinse and repeating that whole foundational structure like we do in every week of the program. But now what you're doing is in a sober state, you're writing a letter to cannabis, right? So you're owning up to any of the things that maybe you're in this program for. I'm overusing you. I know there's some stuff I'm hiding. This is what I really love about you. All these things. And then
just opening awareness.
Yeah, just opening awareness, right? And opening up a dialogue, right? Because again, as a source of divination, just like the I Ching, right? Like you'll read a passage and then that will trigger an intuitive pull of what that actually means in your life. So it's not about a right or wrong answer. It's just about
Well,
gaining
without awareness, we can't adjust the seat. We can't steer the ship.
exactly. Awareness really is like the name of the game for me. If I can continue gaining awareness, that's a good enough goal. I know I'm hitting the mark.
Yep, that's right.
Exactly.
The rest of the side effects sort itself out.
Exactly. And so after you write this first letter, you then connect with the plant. You wait until you feel it in your entire being and presence. And then you write a letter back to yourself from the point of view of cannabis speaking to you. So you almost use yourself as a channel, which a lot of these terms are woo woo. So I don't put them in a lot when I'm talking about it, but I feel like,
look, man,
we
at
understand
this point,
it, yeah, throw them in. So you're using yourself as a channel to get some messages. And when I first created this, I was hosting a men's retreat and I had on the calendar cannabis workshop. Had no idea what I was going to do. I was doing these cannabis ceremonies, but most people there had already experienced what I normally do. So I was like, I want to change it up. I don't want to give them the same thing. So about 10 minutes before this workshop started, that idea got downloaded to me. And a lot of what I do in my one-on-one work is language and story work, right? So illuminating the limiting stories and then using different tactics to start changing words around to make things that are disempowering more empowering and start to bring awareness to our language and how we're speaking to ourselves and what language we're using when we're communicating with others and all of this stuff, because language creates our reality. Abracadabra in Aramaic literally translates to with my word I create. So this is one of like the universal forces of power that we have in our lives, and a lot of us are just splurging disempowering language all over our lives. And so in the first module right here, Connect with Cannabis, the first language module we have, you're illuminating a lot of not only what you're talking to with regards to how you're viewing cannabis and your sober state, but also how you perceive cannabis would speak back to you and what that says about your relationship dynamic with the plant. Then in module 3, we're moving into flipping the script. So now we're actually teaching you how to interact with cannabis to first, in a sober state, illuminate the limiting beliefs you have. And we're teaching them how to do that. Then connecting with cannabis and learning how to flip the script and see them from a different vantage point. Because that's what cannabis does. It can shift your perception. It can shift your awareness to a different, type of, just idea, right? Or idea to call it on brand. And so, through these modules, we're teaching people like the tools for life, but just with cannabis put into it, right? And so like I tell everyone, like for the certification process, they're going to have clients that might not work with cannabis. Well, that's great. You still learn 10 modalities that you could even do without cannabis that are still very useful, right? So, that's how we created them, because we know that not everyone is going to be certified and only want to be a cannabis coach. They might be one thing they do in their arsenal that they do.
That's right. It's another tool in the toolbox.
Exactly. But let's face it, right? Like cannabis is blowing up. There's a lot of people interacting with it, and there's a lot of questions people have. And if you're a coach or a facilitator or guide or healer or whatever the hell name you want to put in yourself, educator, whatever you want to say, if you're one of those people and you now know how to speak that language and ensure that your client is doing more good than harm with this plant, well, then they're going to be able to get more benefit from your vast amount of knowledge. And also you're going to make sure that they're not sidelining the work you're doing together by numbing out with cannabis, right? Because again, it's a slippery slope, and with great power comes great responsibility. And I think that now we know better, we can start doing better, right? Like this information wasn't out all the time. Science is just, really still coming out with cannabis, but there's a lot of science that we teach in the program too, because we have 3 module tracks: science, ceremony, and the integration/coaching modules. So by the end, you've learned the science behind this, so you can talk the talk. You've learned the ceremony. You've gone through the direct experiences and changed as a result. And now you can walk that walk. And now with the integration and coaching, you know how to hold space and hold a container for those you're going to lead through the same process to be able to actually allow them to connect with this plant in that way too. So it's super fun.
I love all of that, because for me, a lot of the veil really got removed due to psychedelics. And once I had kind of stepped over a threshold into that, with psilocybin being the first, I've never ever felt any reason not to have interest in what more is there. What awareness comes from it, I personally feel relatively robust and able to handle a lot of information from that realm. And so kind of almost feel like one of the jobs is to go there and mine what you can out of it to share back.
100%.
It's an adventure.
Absolutely.
And yeah,
it's the last true frontier. That's how I put it, right? Like, you know, and I'm a nerd for things like ancient Sumeria and Atlantis and Lemuria, and, you know, getting on Gaia and just diving in and going, what if any of this is true, right? And, you know, kind of something that they talk about too is this idea that, you know, back in these times, we lived in different brainwave frequencies and we just lived in a completely different reality. And so it's very interesting to look at things from that point of view and realize, like, once again, we don't really know what we don't know. And what we know is really nothing. And so it's really a paradox, you know?
We have no fucking clue of the
I
history of
know.
this planet.
And so it's funny that, like, when we look at like those cultures, a lot of them say that the reason why we're not finding ETs out there is because in reality, if they're that much more advanced than us, they would have realized a long time that it would go within. And so that's why I call it the last true frontier, you know. And
Well,
so
there's, I
I
mean,
don't know if I know
there's an
that, but
interesting argument, right? That there's
yeah,
possibly more depth in than there is external to adventure.
yeah.
Man, it's yeah, I love all of it too. For being total fucking meathead goon that's come into this world much later on, and the woo woo side of it. I mean, once that veil got ripped off again, like I said, of what psychedelics did and what cannabis was used for, and I realized that, holy fuck, like my life isn't going down the shitter. I am getting more awareness to kind of solve some problems. I am getting to look at these ugly parts of myself that I haven't addressed. And the more that I figured it out, the more things have continued to go the right direction. Like, no fucking way without cannabis and without, you know, psychedelics and more meditation into my own shit. Like, I definitely don't fucking handle my divorce well a few years ago. Like, I would have been shitty. I would have fucking burned everything to fucking ash instead of be a decent fucking person to someone I had spent a lot of my life with. And that awareness that, like, I don't know how much of that was, but that's what happens when divorce happens. That's what the rules are, right? Like, well, you do this, you go to college, you get a job, and then you're happy and you lock in, and that's what success looks like. And instead of just embracing, I don't know what's coming, especially if I look back 10 years and say, like, holy shit, tell that guy what I'm doing right now. Like, no fucking way. He thinks you're full of shit. There's no way I could predict to him what my life has been. So I'm done trying to predict the next 10. And so using this to look more at, like, what am I driven to? What is my purpose? What do I want? And how do I set future me up with as many options to make good decisions as I can? And once the veil got torn off of everything I thought about this was incorrect, that allowed me to look at everything from the woo-woo side of stuff, with everything that I would have loved to call bullshit and pussy and whatever else, all this self-love, self-talk, fucking whatever. What if I'm wrong there? Why don't we just try and then have an opinion? How about that? Why don't we just fucking give her a go with a full run? What's the worst that happened? I'm stoked. Like, I'm a little happier like the rest of these people I'm around. Like, fuck, this seems like a great side effect. And it's been a huge benefit to me that the more awareness I get, the more that I can kind of figure out what buttons to push, and using that to help my performance, not only as an athlete, but as a fucking human. That I want to be able to do more and experience more and see more of this wondrous fucking life that exists on our planet, and use whatever tools help make that more possible. And if there's something I can take that gives me a bit more gratitude and present sense of a moment to connect, like, what a fucking rad tool to have.
Exactly. And, you know, you brought up two amazing things there. One being the fact that, you know, for a lot of people, they've never tried things. I'm not talking about cannabis because, again, it's not meant for everyone, but like the self-talk and all these things, right? I used to think the same thing. I'm like, that's stupid. That won't work.
Right.
But I was only saying that from what other people had told me, because they had never tried it either, but
We've
they
never
thought
done it either.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I realized that after a while, and I was like, well, why don't I actually form my own opinion from experience? And so what I tell everyone is, hey, whether or not you choose to believe me, whether or not you like cannabis, whether or not you think self-help is bullshit, if it's your opinion from your own experience, awesome. Just have your own experience before you form an opinion on it, right?
And
That's
whatever you believe about it is right.
exactly whatever you believe, you become. You'll find evidence to support anything because we don't live in an objective reality. Everything is subjective, and quantum physics has shown this. So what's right for me might not be right for you, which is why it's so silly when I go online and it's like the 5 healthiest foods. It's like, unless you have a food sensitivity or unless you have an allergy to one of these things, right? Then you're going to poison yourself with it, right? So everything comes back to intuition and discernment. And what you were talking about with regards to, the career path and the marriage and all these things is that what they do is they put the cart before the horse. And what I like to think about this is how Eckhart Tolle talks about that we have 2 purposes in life, which is our inner purpose, which is to wake up, which is a cliche term, but it essentially means to turn on and start remembering who and what we really are and individuate in Carl Jung's terms. Then we have an outer purpose, which is simply wherever our inner purpose leads us. And so I think that if instead of going for all these external things like, oh, go to college to get a career, to get a house, to get a wife, to then be happy, or get a partner and then be happy, what if it was like, go figure out who you are and then trust who you are to lead you to where you're supposed to be?
Yeah, maybe have a chapter in there, figure out who you are before you decide to make another human.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you're fucking trapped.
Yes, I know. Dude, that's a real thing, man.
Well, and like, the empathy that comes with all that type of stuff. I mean, especially with being fucking 40 and no kids and no any intentions of any kids, it changed a lot my own empathy that I had for my parents of like, of course you have no fucking idea what you were doing.
Yeah.
Of course you don't. You have zero resources and you live in the middle of this town and your 6 friends have the exact same life as you. And like, and dude, and my fucking childhood was great.
Mm-hmm.
It's fucking great. But of course they didn't know what the fuck they were doing. And so that just allowed a lot more empathy for other people. As soon as I realized that no one has any fucking clue what they're doing, and I hope everyone's giving it their best shot.
That's like literally all I come back to is like, did I do my best today? Right. And maybe my best was fucking the whole day up. And that's what was my best that day. Right.
I've had days like that where I just switch gears and I'm like, all right, I'm going to sweep the floor because I can't fuck that task up.
Exactly.
Here's a positive win. Let's get that one done. Here's another one I can do. Sit in the sauna. Here's another one I can do. Wash the dishes. There's a bunch of stuff where I can get positive momentum because I can't fuck those tasks up.
Yes. And those things are so valuable. I talk about those things a lot with cannabis too, because, we talked about this lack of connection issue, right? But yet connection is something we can have in every moment. But a lot of us, and I'll speak it from personal experience, what I would do is I would go, cool, when I'm with my friends and I'm at a concert or when I'm like, doing those kind of things, I feel good. But when I'm washing the dishes or doing laundry, any of those things are things that are undesirable. And what cannabis helped me flip the script on was realizing like, oh my God, anything I do, if I put a different story to it, allows it to become a connection exercise. So for me, if I want to tune into woo-woo self-love, right, or something like that, then what I can do is go, well, I fold my laundry and put it away because it's an act of self-love. And I know when I wake up in the morning and I look at my calendar and I have a bunch of stuff to do, I'm going to be really excited when I realize there's no other stuff I have to try to fit into my day, like folding laundry or doing any of these things or meal prepping. It's like, those are acts of self-love. And now when I do them, I get excited because I know what they mean to me.
Well, like, they're buying the future.
Exactly. They're giving me space in my day-to-day life where I'm not going to get overwhelmed because I see other things that then I have to try to put into my day from old patterns of telling me I need to get it all done. So it's like these kind of things are so funny to talk about. Yeah, get it all done.
Man, it's really funny. Like once you can start illuminating the lies of like, well, I have to get it all done. Oh,
and where does all end? Right?
Oh, no, and like
thirst trap.
Right. And then like what a realization when you go, oh, none of that matters.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think when you're one of those things you're talking about, right? That like those expectations from family, the rules that get kind of put before you. One of the ways I've really always liked it described is, like you said, you have that outer sense of the external part. And then it is trying to make decisions based on where the drive is going. And I've heard this described as like the elephant and the rider.
Mm.
And so when the elephant and the rider aren't aligned, it's really fucking tough. But if your elephant has been given all these rules from birth, childhood, experience, community, people you're around, and you think in your gut, right? Like that's that part of, I mean, look at what decisions people make based on fucking political party they believe in, or
Oh,
religious group, or any of these type of things that, let's all run this back. Remember, we made these things.
yeah.
These aren't fucking deities. They're just groups of people we've at some point agreed upon, like fucking traffic laws. There's no physics that fucking make this happen. It's less convenient to do it a different way right now.
Yes.
And as soon as like you kind of get that awareness of like, well, who put in place my desire that this is going to lead me to happiness, when you've never had a chance to go, what makes me happy? And I found that some more of the awareness work and more of the meditation work and more of the woo woo for myself allows me to direct the elephant better. Like I can take a chance and be like, yo, we're not fucking into this thing. So why are we wasting our energy here?
Yes.
And it really allows me to kind of shift that base perspective back to where I need it to be, whether that's gratitude, whether it's, hey man, remember that's not our focus. You know, look, in all of this wild shit, man, I can so easily get caught up in the business side of making money, the coaching, the go, progress, build. And then I have minutes where for me, like I love the travel and adventure. And I'm like, yo, you're happy living in a fucking van. What are you doing, dude? Like, why are you so fucking stressed about that? You're happy living in a fucking van. Like, you have so many outs that if you don't want to do the shit you're doing, like you're not downgrading your life. So hump the brakes, lunatic, on trying to build whatever thing it is that you get focused on for the wrong reason, whether that's financial or building for the wrong reasons.
Yes.
You know, for me, the financial thing, I'm fucking into it, man. Don't get me wrong. I want to make money as much as I
Fun game.
can.
It's a fun game
because it gives me options.
Yeah.
To run the simulation as much fun as possible. Whatever this fucking thing is that's gonna end.
Yeah.
Fucking come creeping up faster and faster every year. And I want more awareness of that. Like I want to look at it. I want to say, fuck, let's try everything. And then be able to look at it and say, was it for me or not for me? In the same way, at this point in my life, alcohol is not really for me. At this point in my life, I don't cook very much because I work with a meal prep company. This is a thing I've eliminated a hassle of. I like cooking. And another chapter in my life, I'll probably do more of it. And I'll fucking go all in and be a lunatic about it then. But right now, accepting the chapter I have and not having to identify with the chapter as who I am, just a what I'm currently doing.
Dude, I love that. And the reason I love it too is because I've been obsessed with this idea of essentialism, and it kind of comes down to a mixture of what you're saying is like what I see as core values, right? Like what do you stand for? What are like your principles and your guiding lights each day? And then every decision you have gets filtered through those, but also essentialism. Like what are the different aspects of your life that really mean a lot? It's like, okay, business. Okay, what's in business? Podcasting, coaching, product development. Okay, cool. What else do you love? Travel and adventure. What else do you love? Having a relationship. Okay, cool. What else do you love? Having friends. So you think about like, what are the core aspects of my life that are essentially the things that I get to now keep in balance to make sure that every single one of them is in a good point. And Paul Chek talks about this a little bit differently with the 4 doctors, right? Dr. Happy, Dr. Quiet, Dr. Diet, Dr. Movement. And so like, how do you keep these 4 doctors in balance so that at any one point in time, you're finding an equal balance and joy from each one of them? Because there might be times if you're starting a new business, let's say, okay, you might have to come out of alignment for a little while, but in that moment, that is alignment, right? Like going full on into that. But there's also like, if you don't take a step back out of that regularly with meditating, breath work, and things aside from just psychedelics that you can do every single day, well, then how do you know you're coming from the right vantage point? Or like you were saying, how do you know you're coming from your own beliefs and your own missions and your own goals rather than coming from someone else's, and from a false sense of security that's going to be given to you, or so you believe, when this thing is achieved? Because I imagine for you, I know for me, and probably many of your listeners, think about this. How many times have you been working towards a goal, reached that goal, and before even taking a breath, had another goal, right? Like that's an example. Like what is that rat race and that thirst trap leading you towards?
Yeah, that's always been it, right? And what I can realize from that, one of the things that I thought about a lot about that and dove into was this little piece on Thomas Jefferson, whether brilliant or quite a fuck up with the three inalienable rights, you know, our life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And the pursuit of happiness part I find really fucking fascinating because it's not happiness. These are very different fucking things. You don't have an unalienable right to be happy.
Mm,
You have the unalienable right to chase the thing that makes you happy.
mm,
Perhaps it is the pursuit where the gold is, not the there. And if that's the absolute fucking brilliance of it or my interpretation of it, either fucking way, I think that that's really key. Like, I know for me, whenever I was training the most and really focused, and whenever I was the most committed to my sport, I'm one of the happiest times in my life because everything has purpose. It has this greater goal. It has this thing I'm working toward. And then in my life, I feel the same way now. Like, I can apply those same rules to, like, well, we're just trying to figure it out and get better. The whole ride is fucking fun. There isn't some magic point now, especially being aware of it. I quit doing that thing. I was like, if we get here, then
yeah.
like, fucking stop. Fucking stop. You're here. Just fucking be here and do the best we can here. And the rest are side effects.
Yes.
And man, it's, you know, I know that people are going to have, as more and more is come out about cannabis, it's fucking crazy that we're still dealing with any of the illegality side of it. Now, how are you managing that? Where are you located in a recreational state?
Yes. Yeah. I'm located in a recreational state. And so for me, you know, teaching cannabis is not something that I can only do in certain states, right? Like, we always tell everyone through the legal agreement we have, like, hey, by signing up for this program, you realize that it's a program talking about interacting with cannabis. And if you're not in a legal state, you might want to rethink that, right? Or do your own thing, but we're not responsible for that, because I think at the end of the day, we're providing educational resources. We're not telling anyone, hey, you must interact with
Right.
cannabis, because like I've said a lot on the show, cannabis is just one river out of almost infinite rivers that can lead you to the same destination in the same sea. But for certain people that have discerned that it's right for them, and for a lot of people that have discerned that not only is it right for them, but they currently have a challenge with it, right? Like, these are who we help. And it's funny because about the third weekend of the program, a lot of people have this really big epiphany that, like, they're going through an identity crisis. They're like, I don't think I want to smoke anymore, right? I don't think I want to consume cannabis anymore. And this is literally what I went through. And I took a full 3-month break because I had a belief system that it was cannabis that was the issue. And then I realized, no, it wasn't. It was how I was interacting with it in the relationship I had. And I took accountability over it. And then I came to a point of self-awareness where I discerned that, hey, if I'm going to interact with this plant, then I am responsible. And knowing the pattern I have for numbing out, I am only going to interact with it on weekends. And I'm going to use my weekdays, the time I'm most prone to stress, to be my sober time. So there's no way I'm numbing out. And then on the weekends, I'm going to go directly in with my intention to what got me fearful that week, what scared me, what stuck me, what triggered me. That's going to be my new relationship with cannabis. And it's changed everything. And it's funny because what you were talking about with the pursuit of happiness, right? Like, I wanted to comment on that because something came through the mail slot when you were talking about that, which was like, whether you think of it as mystery, the pursuit, the journey,
Yep.
or the desiring, right? Like, I think that's what Aubrey was saying too. He's like, I realized that I desire to desire. It's not about what I desire. It's the feeling of desiring something. It's the rush of that. And it's very similar to, it's the pursuit of happiness. It's not really like, happiness is fleeting, right? You have it from moment to moment,
Yeah.
but
Happiness is a fucking moment.
exactly. But you know what? You can gain joy if you find joy in the process. Like, joy is the thing that's more sustainable to me than happiness. Happiness is almost relatable to me to contentment. And for me, I don't really want to be content in my life. Now, are there times that I don't want to always be needing other things, but I always want to be like in a perfect moment of like, I'm happy where I'm at and I'm excited to keep going. I don't
But
want
that's
one or the other, you know?
in the same way that it works for training, right? Like, it's the same fucking rules. And it's, I need, I have to stress my system enough, and then I have to have time to create adaptation,
Mm,
which I take a deload. How
mm,
many people, you know, people will schedule deloads into workout programs for linear periodization. They never schedule it into perhaps drug use, perhaps fucking their own panic of life of like, hey, I need a slower week next week. But I have time to think about all this shit because my shit's together.
Yes.
And I'm not fucking drowning.
Yes.
I'm not struggling to pay my bills. I haven't in a very long time. And so I get to have existential crisis because all my fucking needs are met. The hierarchy of needs has been sorted a long fucking time. But where people run into problems is most of our hierarchy of needs have been sorted for a really fucking long time. The thing is, our brains really like problems to solve, and they don't do well idle.
Mm.
And if you're idle and you're not challenging yourself with some piece of discomfort of just finding a new edge of what do I think about that information? What is, not avoiding it. What does training for this new thing? What does changing my diet accomplish? What does trying some new stuff give me more information and experience about to continue to shape my path forward instead of just closing doors off?
Yes.
Having that awareness to it is the key. Like, man, whether it's psychedelics or it's exercise or it's anything, it's the awareness part that's key. And whatever gets people there, that's where I see the biggest benefit, is people turning on that light bulb that you see people shift to and realize that total accountability for all of it is the only answer. And I believe cannabis can be a tool for that. I believe psychedelics can be a tool for that. I believe exercise can be a tool for that. Anything that puts the ball in your court and you can realize that all of the things, I can't tell you about your past.
Mm-hmm.
There's some shit that possibly goes down that you didn't get a say on, and I'm super fucking sorry. But from today forward, we can either choose to be at the wheel or letting those things continue to make decisions for us. But until we have the acknowledgement of like, holy shit, I've been making those decisions based on this fucking thing, you can't shift out of it. And so hearing more people share information about how to find that with breath work, it's so fucking critical to where I think we are as a species. Like or maybe not a species, in our current culture.
Yes.
We have gotten very comfortable. And clearly, as humans, one of the things we fucking really like is confrontation and fighting and all these things. So focus more this way about getting better and wanting to not tolerate your bullshit.
Yes.
And not tolerate why I'm fucking right and why I have to be right and I have to be respected in my right. When you can just say like, oh, we just disagree. That's cool. I don't give a fuck what you think. You know what I mean? Like, I'm glad that we can share on some things because I'd love to learn from you.
Yeah.
But if we disagree, that's cool too, man.
Yeah. It's totally fine. You know why? Because we're not seeking validation from one another, because we understand that either of us could be right or wrong. And it doesn't matter, because if we're right to us, so long as we're not hurting anyone else and trying to be right, hey, like, I enjoy cannabis. If I meet someone that's like, I don't like cannabis, I'm not going to try to convince them of my reality of why cannabis is good or why they should interact with it. I'm going to high five them for choosing their truth and going from their own awareness of, hey, this plant's not right for me. And it's same with exercise or with anything. And that's why I think politics, news, all this stuff is such a thirst trap, because most of the people watching it have no fucking clue how much it's leading to their experience of life being so disempowered, because they're getting stuck into, it's what I believe, and it's the other person who's the enemy. And it's like, listen, we're all souls having a human experience, and we're all thugging it out and trying to figure it out as we go. And none of us know what the fuck we're doing. Some of us look more confident than doing it the others, because we have faith that wherever our heart is leading to us to is going to be the right place. And it's fucking terrifying, right? Following your heart, doing things that aren't logical, that aren't based in what society has told us and told generations of who we've come from is the right path, is scary as fuck. But you have two options. Either, at least in my case, right? I'll put it for me, because maybe for some people this works, but for me, it was two options. Either one, follow the typical path and distract myself with Corvettes and God knows what the fuck else to forget about how my life never shaped up the way that felt good to me and I never actually knew myself, or go with my heart that scared the fuck out of me but felt right. And I can't tell anyone that you should definitely go for what your heart says, because it's going to be fucking scary, right? But what I will say is it's the only way that I have been able to find true fulfillment and sustain it. And it still scares the shit out of me, but
No, but it's supposed to.
Exactly. And that's the
I don't
fun.
want to watch movies I know the fucking ending of.
Dude, fuck yes. I don't want to open my Christmas presents before Christmas morning is the
Fuck
way I
all
would
that.
put it,
And
right? It's like, fuck, dude. It is the
buy the
mystery.
ticket, take the ride, dude. Like at some point,
Exactly.
you got to fucking step off the thing and decide, right or wrong, I'm at the wheel making the decisions. Like, you know what a fucking difference in type of person we are if you're telling me you're a slot machine player instead of playing like blackjack or a game where you get to make a decision.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh fuck, we're very fucking different humans. If you're willing to just be like, no, just hit the button, it's fine, whatever happens. Like, nah, man, if you're telling me someone gets a fucking chance, I want a way to play.
Yes.
I want to be at the wheel. I want to be making decisions. I'm okay with failure.
100%.
Failures are fucking coming. And also, none of them are life ending, I've figured out.
It's
At least none of the ones I've run into.
Yeah, you fail forward when you actually choose, not based on logic, right? So for anyone who's looking for scientific evidence of this, you're probably going to be waiting a while. But if you just choose consciously to believe that life is happening for you, and therefore whatever happens, you get to respond to, and that's what makes the event positive, negative, whatever, because duality is simply a concept made up from the 3D mind, and it serves its purpose, but it's not everything. And so the analogy I always give is that if you're playing a video game and you get so sucked into the video game that you actually think that who you are is the video game character, that's where most people are at. And no judgment. I've been there too. But this is why we're talking about the fact that if you don't have these moments where you can remember that you're the person playing the video game and not the actual person in the video game, well, then your life's going to be led around for you, right? Not by you. Your life's going to be created for you, not by you, and not by design. And that's the big challenge. Like, and that's what we're talking about, right? Like, whatever conclusion someone comes to, you think God's not real? Awesome. So long as you came to that on your own accord and didn't just listen to what someone else said. You believe God's real? Cool. So long as you came to that from someone from your own perspective and not what someone else told you. It's like this degree of sovereignty and accountability and ownership. I imagine that if someone listening was like me, when I first heard these things, they sounded like homework. They were like, oh, that's what? I just have to take accountability for everything? Yeah, because you're only looking right now at the negative part of it. And it's not even negative.
It's freedom.
Like, exactly. Because, you know, if you are the one that led you to where you're at in terms of how you perceive your situations, well, guess who the only person that can fix it is? You. And so, yeah, you might feel disempowered for a quick second until you realize that you've actually just been empowered to the umpth degree, because now you have a strategy of moving through life where everything is able to be perceived, learned from, integrated, and moved forward with.
Yeah, and I think wherever you want to start putting those fucking lines, man, of what exactly what you were saying, like what are the things that I am, you know, not what was expected of me. And especially then try to figure out, well, where did those fucking expectations actually originate? Because if they didn't come from me and perhaps on my parents by their parents, and like, holy shit, it goes far enough down. But at some point, someone's got to fucking put their foot down and say, hold up. You know, I can just do whatever the fuck I want, right? And there's no real consequences for that. And with that said, like, there are consequences, of course. Of course. Abuse of anything is a consequence. Any of the things. My only rule that I have, right, is like, I want anyone to pursue with fucking complete reckless abandon their dream, but it can't ever get in the fucking way of someone else's.
Mm.
And no one's going to give a shit about yours more than you do. You know, the show, I've changed it over the last couple months. It was so for a really long time. We did a couple hundred episodes there. And so now it's not dead yet. And kind of the emphasis behind that, man. And one of the reasons I wanted you on was I think there's a big chunk in the second half of life that comes after whatever this awakening is. And whether people want to put it as this midlife crisis, but perhaps it's more of an awareness. It's a bit of stepping away from the autopilot and trying to figure out why it's fucking running that way.
Mm.
And then you can decide to input your own code.
Mm.
And so with what you're talking about with awareness and coming to it, I think you're giving people those tools to make the most of the life that's in front of them and process what has been that maybe they weren't driving for.
Yes, 100%. You know, it's funny, like we look at language, right? Middle life crisis. What I like to call it is middle life ignition, right?
Right.
And I know that like neither of us are looking at it like a crisis because we see how funny it is, right? Like, yeah, it can definitely feel like a
The
crisis.
vocabulary is fucking wild.
It's so wild because again, if you want to view what you're going through as a middle life crisis, well, guess what? Now the story is going to be it's a crisis. And so you're going to call upon what you've seen a crisis to be in the past, which could be anything from like a really horrible event, like a shooting or something terrible, right? And now you're applying that language to what you're going through. And so it's catastrophizing it. It's allowing your mind to catastrophize, and almost the punishment doesn't fit the crime, right?
Never
Like,
does.
exactly. And so, like, again, if you're accountable, then how do you choose to view what you're going through if it's, say, a middle life crisis, right? I like to think of it like a middle life ignition. It's that ignition point that tells you something, or maybe everything, is not working out. And what am I going to do to fix it? And I think that for me, it's like those kind of moments, and this whole thing we're talking about awareness, for me, who I'm looking for are the people that connect with cannabis, that are resonating with this. Because for people that don't connect with cannabis, there's many other ways to gain this awareness, right? We've talked about it before in the show, right? Like, many different rivers lead to the same sea. There's a Hindu proverb that goes something like this. So it goes, there are many paths that lead to the same destination. The only quote unquote wrong path is the one that goes around telling everyone else that their path isn't the right one. And it's like, that's my thing, right? Like, if we're spiritual beings having a soul that's having a human experience, then what I choose to believe anyway, and people can write this off, they don't believe it, but I believe that we're God experiencing itself, quantum source, whatever you want to call it. And like you were saying, we're here to give that fucking experience a really good time, right? And we're here to learn, and we're here to mess up and color outside the lines. That is what the human experience is. It's much more like cooking than baking, right? It's not an exact science, but it's a science, and sometimes you put too much salt in, or sometimes you put too many beans in, right? But you'll probably be able to still figure it out and eat it, and it'll be fine, and it will nourish you so long as you can learn from it. And so it's just so interesting to talk about these things, because for me, cannabis was the thing that started a lot for me. But within this, and we talk about this a lot in the program, that cannabis is one piece of a holistic health puzzle, right? You still need to have your diet in order. You still need to have all these other things that allow your being, your vessel that you drive around this experience with and have this simulation experience, or whatever you want to call it. The higher vibrations you're able to hold, to use another woo term, the higher vibrations you're able to hold, the better experience you're going to be able to have. And if you look into hermetics, the law of resonance says this, right? It's like like attracts like, is basically what it says. And so, like, if you think about this, right, like, if we're vibrating at a very high frequency, well, then the people, places, and things that come into us are going to be in resonance with how we're vibrating. And so it really begs the question of, what is our mission in this life? And for me, it's what Ram Dass said, which is, the best thing I can do for you is work on me. The best thing I can do for me is work on me. Right. So it always comes back to, it's an inside job, and
always
so, like,
weed your garden.
The thirst trap is everything that's trying to pull you away from the knowing that all you need to do is work on yourself, and the world around you will change. Everything else is a thirst trap. Everything telling you, hey, you need clearer skin, and then you'll feel happy. Hey, you need to drink this alcohol, and then you'll feel happier. Hey, you need to have more friends, then you'll be happy. Any of these things could be perceived as true, and you could have supporting pieces of evidence for days that could support you in this. But it all comes back to you, because we know that there have been people that have lived in isolation and been joyful, right? So it can't, like, again, there's no objectiveness here. It's just what we choose to believe.
Yep.
And again, for me, it's like, if I believe that all the power's in me, I simply have a much higher vibrational experience of life, and I'm much more joyful as a result. And that's why I live like this. Anyone else listening can make their own choices and their own discernment. But for me, and it sounds like you too, we've discovered that for us, living accountably and being able to have ownership over our lives and live as sovereign beings, dude, it's the best. Because if I mess up, okay, cool, I get to fix it. If I get it right, hey, I did it. And it's like,
what did we learn either way?
Exactly. You win or learn. That's how I choose to view it. Because again, there's no evidence to support that you don't lose, right? But how do I choose to view it? I win or learn. Because if I view it in that lens, I have a better experience of life. And so it came down for me that eventually I just chose to believe whatever made me feel empowered. And I didn't care anymore about what other people thought about it, because I'm not on here seeking validation, right? Like, because I've come to these things,
permission to do these things.
Exactly. I'm going to do them anyway. And if people like them, bonus points. If people don't, cool. Don't listen to me. I don't want anyone who doesn't resonate with me to keep listening to me, because chances are it's going to be a waste of my time and their time. And there's probably someone else out there that's saying something that will resonate with them. I want them to go listen to that person, because there's no competition here. There's 7.5 billion people. And if we want the whole world to wake up and have a higher quality of life, I can't be too attached to who likes my message and who doesn't. I just need to come from the heart and ensure that the people that do resonate with this are hearing it and being able to benefit from it and take that and do whatever they want to do in their lives and inspire others.
You know, and what I hear there, right, is that like I want to chase the things that bring me enthusiasm and bring me fulfillment, and I'm not looking for permission of that anymore.
Yes.
Like, to me, that's such a base boundary that you have to set. And it's that, you know, that like I don't want to waste any of my energy anymore on if the people around me are people I have to sell on ideas that I want to be better. Like, what a waste of energy that could just like to just get me back to zero, basically, to start. Like, I have to upsell. Whereas if I chose my surroundings better with people who are interested in this, people that do want to level up, people that do want to push themselves, now I have people that want to help me solve a problem, and less people who are only looking at problems.
Yeah.
You know, the fucking made up problems of it. And a lot of that can come, man. Like, a lot of that is that scarcity, and a lot of it's the fear, and a lot of it keeps us in one place. And, you know, that can be exacerbated by whether that's cannabis used inappropriately or alcohol or anything. Because, again, you know, one of the things I loved most about my trip to go do ayahuasca was, you know, people wanted these questions, right? Like, is alcohol okay? Like, what the fuck do you mean okay? Quit asking permission, you goddamn adult. It's a fucking chemical. You either put it in your body or you don't. You react well to it or you fucking don't. Choose. Like, there's not a right or wrong. And like, I just remember like even there, people looking for this permission. And I guess I quit giving a fuck a long time ago. That it's a fuck yes or me, or it's a no. And I don't want to waste any time on a bunch of maybe bullshit in my life or a bunch of maybe people. And people can come and go through my life. These chapters are going to change. I'll meet new people and have relationships with them, and that relationship will run its course at some point, and we'll move the fuck on with our lives, and I'll love you anyway.
Exactly.
You know,
Dude.
fucking flow with it way more than trying to say like, but this is as good as it gets. Hold on, everyone. We're locking it down. Like, it doesn't fucking work that way. It's going to fucking change. And your identity is simply, what are the actions you choose to take every day? You know, what are you choosing to actually be? Be is a fucking verb. Be is the doing. And that, you know, Gandhi, the be the change you want to be. Like, do the fucking work yourself. If everyone does that, it sorts out. Like, everyone lead by that example of operating out of love and not scarcity. And like, the giving is what keeps it coming back from you. Without that open channel and you're just fucking taking, it's hoarding and nothing's getting out. You've closed the fucking circle.
100%. You know, like, to use another woo term, because I love throwing that around, because it's so funny too that, like, you know, we're aware now that none of this stuff is really woo, but it is funny to call it that because it's just a funny term to put on it. So for anyone listening, I do this jokingly, but like, everything is energy, right? And we hear about this with money. If you're just hoarding money, right, then the energetic current isn't able to flow. It doesn't mean go spend all your money on bullshit, but it means invest it, get it moving, right? And so, like, for all
Take
of
some
these
fucking
things,
chances, man.
exactly, you know, and I think that, like, for people, you know, what I've realized is that people come into my life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And I don't know. And I'm unattached to it, because the analogy that I give for life, and someone actually told me recently, you should make this a children's book. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And I don't think I made this up. I think I took it from someone. So whoever you are, shout out. But here's the analogy, right? That imagine we all go to Disneyland together. And we're all there, or Disney World, whatever the bigger one is. I think it's Disney World. So we're all at Disney World. We're having a blast. We're all riding the rides. We're eating fried dough, whatever our happy day is. Well, certain part of us, right? Certain people have plans the next day. They have things they got to do. So they leave before we do. And so when we're there without them, yeah, it sucks that they're not riding the rides with us. We wish they were there having that experience, but we know they're still there, and we're going to see them when we go home. And so, like, for me, when I'm moving through my life, you know, and this is not like, oh, I figured this out, it's easy now. It's fucking hard. But
none of it's ever fucking easy.
Please don't anyone hear me saying any of this and think that I've mastered any of this, because I haven't. I'm definitely
every fucking door is a room that you realize is infinite and you have no comprehension of it.
Dude, it's a cyclical state of becoming, right? Like that verb you were talking about with be, right? It's like, I haven't arrived. I'm in a cyclical state of becoming and
we're always in transition.
Exactly. And so for me, what I've realized is that when I'm moving through life and there are things or people that come into my life for a season, I realized I'm like, well, what I choose to believe, again, not based on fact, but what I choose to believe is I'm going to see these people again. So in this lifetime, their role has played out. And that doesn't mean they're a bad person or that I've evolved out of them or that I won't say hi to them if I see them. It's just you can tell when the energetic vibration is just you're going separate ways. Doesn't mean that my way is the better way or they're stupid or any of these things. It's just something that happens. And I'm happy and I'm always there to support them so long as they're not like throwing their screaming babies on me and trying to use me as a, their pocket coach or any of these things. They're not stepping on my boundaries. It's like my door will always be open for them, but I'm not going to try to force it, The
boundaries are my responsibility to keep.
Exactly. They're not there.
I'm not mad at you for trying to cross my boundary. I don't have a feeling about it whatsoever. I just know I can't give you any of my energy. You don't get access.
Exactly.
The fucking rules. Like, I'm not obligated to let someone have access to my energy. And if I have 100% energy to operate a day that can chase my fucking dreams and be around people I love and support the people I love, or I can give like 2% of my battery to some guy in traffic that I've never fucking met, like, fuck him. He didn't get any of it. Like, I'll handle that shit like a fucking Hindu cow the best I can.
Yes.
Like, fucking just sit there and smile because, that's my choice where my energy goes. I'm the one who either can feed that frustration and let that fucking snake continue to grow, or I can shut it the fuck down and I can be in control of my energy. I can choose what media I consume. Because it's weird. The less I've watched the news, it isn't like any of the stories ain't still fucking found me.
100%.
Still know about it. Also, since both sides are full of shit, what's the point?
Exactly. You're informed, but you're not smothered. And that's what a lot of people don't realize is they're smothering themselves. And I ask everyone, right? People watch the news. I know people that have been watching the news their entire lives. I'm like, cool. What have you ever done to change anything that's on the news? Well, I can't do anything to change it. Well, then why the fuck are you watching anyway?
Fucking matter.
Right? Like,
we love it. It's incredible, right? Like, I think the internet taught us a few things. Like, as this thing has kind of grown, whether that's social media or YouTube or any of this, we're all aware, especially as content creators, negative comments always get a bigger fucking light than the positive ones that say thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And since those things get more interaction and the negative stories get more interaction because it's fucking trolling, like, I don't believe these news and media sources aren't aware of the psychology behind this. And if they are, at what point do I consider that attack malicious? And I don't fucking deal with anyone. Those are my fucking boundaries pretty much stop there. Is anyone who ever treats me with malicious intent, fuck them.
Mm-hmm. Kick him to the curb.
Unacceptable.
Mm-hmm.
I can be wronged. I can be offended. My feelings can get hurt. But that can also come from misunderstanding. Because I don't allow people in my life who would treat me with malicious intent.
Mm-hmm.
I can allow we had a disagreement and a misunderstanding and my feelings are hurt and perhaps I didn't share my perspective.
Mm.
Perhaps I don't know their shit. But if I think you tried to be shitty, I don't need to see a second flag for it. That's my fuck up then, that I allowed you close, and then I have to accept. Sometimes they're going to do that.
Sometimes
and decide, is it fucking worth it? Is that person worth it in your life that sometimes they're going to do this shitty thing?
Mm-hmm.
And some people are. Like, we've had buddies that like, yeah, I know he's going to be a fucking problem at some point, but I love him.
Yeah.
And that's me to decide. Like, I'm not going to be mad anymore that my buddy does that thing.
Yes.
Like, just be like, well, that's part of it. We signed up for that. And that's the accountability to all of it.
Yeah. And what a great awareness, right? Because again, it puts you in the driver's seat. And again, having been the passenger in my life for quite some time and having run that whole course, I'm now choosing consciously to be the driver. And just like you were saying, right? Doesn't mean that sometimes I don't have someone do something and realize, well, I'm allowing that person in my life and it is worth it. And that person is inherently good, just like I believe all people are, but I'm okay with dealing with the thing that is not okay with me, right? But if someone is coming into my space and trying to tell me what to believe, and then I put my boundary up and they try to step over that, oh, it's see you later, because I just don't have time for that, right? Like, it's not my job to figure people out or to restate my boundaries over and over. It's my job to actually disconnect myself from that energy suck.
Take action.
So that I'm actually coming from a full cup, because let's face it, right? You're a coach, I'm a coach. we give our power and our energy to other people that we're in contractual agreements with because we want to help them. So we're already expending a lot of energy every day, podcasting, all this stuff, right? Being of service. It does take energy, which is fucking great because I don't want to have an overflowing cup constantly. I want to give it out. But that is my mission in life. So if anything comes in the way of that, that is like not like a disagreement with someone I love or something like that.
No.
Right?
Malicious attack.
Exactly. Malicious attack where someone is trying to drain my battery and like they're passing off their screaming babies on me and putting the trauma on me, or any of those things. I don't have the energy to deal with that because my mission is too important for me. And it's not like my mission is this grandiose thing, but everyone's mission should be that level for them. No matter what you're doing, whether you're selling hot dogs on the beach and that's what gives you joy and how you give it to others.
But what even a shitty thing because of our culture that you have to justify, right? That like, well, I'm so passionate about my mission and then need to follow that up with some type of fucking thing about like, I'm not saying it's great.
Yeah.
What if like what does that have to do with my fucking mission in any type of comparison? But we're so fucking hardwired for that of like, oh, well, you think your mission's fucking great. Like, I didn't say shit about yours.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't say yours isn't great too. They can all be fucking awesome, you scarcity minded idiot.
Yeah. Dude,
like,
you're so 100% right. Because like, dude, I want someone to come to me and think their mission is fucking awesome. Like that's what inspires me. Like,
well, I want you as stoked on your fucking life as I am.
Exactly.
And realize you not being is your fucking choice.
Exactly. And if you're not, you're probably not going to be able to give your joy to others and complete that reciprocity loop that we talk about, which is find joy, give it to others. It's that simple, no matter what it is. It's those two things, at least from what I've discovered. And if you put a monkey wrench in those two things, your whole life's going to come out of alignment. But if you just allow yourself to be able to find what gives you joy and then find a way to give that back to others and protect yourself to make sure you can do that sustainably, your life's going to turn out fucking awesome. You know, it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be without a challenge, but everything will have a contextualized place because the challenges you go through will be able to be put through your mission and why you're choosing to go through that from a conscious place. Right. And everything will be able to fit in its perfect spot. And that's simply what intention does too. If you make an intention to go on a mission, whether that's a business, whether that's psychedelics, etc., then you face some unseen challenge or unknown challenge. Well, you go, well, I know why I'm going through this. If you know your why, you can go through almost anyhow, and that's the thing, right? That is ultimately the thing.
Yeah. I mean, why do you think people have such a hard time putting a finger on their why?
Because they are too rooted in the mind of what someone else is telling them is their why. And for me, what I always tell people, and this is a great exercise to do either with or without cannabis, but I'll include cannabis into it. A lot of people ask me, how do I know my why? And I go, well, what do you want your legacy to be? And they go, well, how do I know I want my legacy to be? I go, cool, write your own eulogy, right? So what do you want people to say about you when you pass on? Because that will tell you what really matters. So if your thing is you were always supporting people, if your thing was like, wow, I made a lot of money and, when people were in need that I cared for, I was able to give them money. Well, cool. Now you have a reason why you might want a lot of money that actually is based on something that means something to you, right? But if like you're thinking you want to be a billionaire and then at your eulogy, what you really want to come out is that they were always there for you. They were always there to lend an ear. Well, if you're going to be a billionaire, you might not have the time to do that, right? So like it allows you to like, it's like if you know what the goal is of what you want people to say when you're in a coffin, right? And what you want to be remembered for, well, then you can reverse engineer that into like what you want to do and what helps you feel joyful.
And what skills do I need to accomplish that thing?
Exactly. That's where intellect comes in, right? The heart, like again, cart before the horse. What I always tell people, and especially men, is that feminine energy needs to come before the masculine energy. And what I mean by that is that feminine energy is the heart. So your heart is what intuitively tells you what your joy is and what you want to do. But it's not going to be what actually gets you to go do the thing, right? So that's your masculine. But if you put your masculine before your feminine, well, then you're just going to be doing a bunch of shit that's not connected to any actual intuitive knowing. You're just doing like cyclically, right? And you're not attached to any goal. So again, right? Like if you make the intention first, well, then your guiding light. Everything needs to fit through that intention. So if you know what you want to do and what gives you joy, well, then it just becomes, how am I going to do that? And then the intellect and the mind can actually help you do that. Right. But it's like a lot of people just put the mind before the heart. And I think that's where people get messed up with the why. It's much more simple than you'd expect.
I'd love that. Like one of the things I work with my mentorship group is like, I think the 4 steps of accomplishing anything are inspiration, awareness, intention, and action. And if I get them out of line, it's not going to work. But if I can figure out the right way, taking what is this thing that fucking I'm inspired by watching this documentary on blah, blah, blah. And then from there, what part of it? Like really fucking boil it down, man. Is it hiking or is it making documentaries? Is it becoming famous? Like what part of it? And then from there, what do we want to get out of it? What are our intentions of this? What are we trying to learn? And then fucking start doing.
100%. Dude, I love that because it's very similar to something I've learned recently called the Four Worlds meditation, which what I say is it's kind of like an arrow. So if you're going to put it in the cannabis context, but also just in a sober state, your intention is the shooting of the arrow, right? So the arrow goes up. And for anyone, I don't know if this is video, are people going to be able to see
Yeah,
this?
it's a video.
Okay, cool. Perfect. So your arrow shooting up, that's your intention. But then when your intention goes up, first thing that's going to get spawned is a idea, right? Or an idea, right? So then you're going to get ideas related to that intention. So maybe your intention is, I want to be happier. Let's just make it simple. Your idea is, well, music, art. Oh my God, I want to create things. Oh my God, so I got all these ideas. Then as your arrow starts to fall, you've got your ideas. Now you start falling through what thoughts come forth as a result of those ideas. What do you think about? Well, I could do painting on, Wednesday nights, and I could do this, or maybe I want to do watercolor, painting, or I want to make music this way. I want to become a guitarist, or I want to do DJing, whatever, all the thoughts. Then as it's continuing to fall, now it's starting to get denser and denser and come into reality, manifest essentially. So you're going from the idea to the thought. Now you're into planning. So now you take the thoughts and you structure it into some plans. Okay, I could paint this week. I could buy a paint kit. I could buy a guitar. I could take guitar lessons, right? You have plans. Now it goes all the way down to the final chapter, which is action. So now from those plans, what actions am I going to take and how can I hold myself accountable? So it's okay, by this Wednesday, I'm going to order a paint kit. By this Friday, I'm going to take my first guitar lesson, right? And you put it on your fucking calendar, right? Like, and you hold yourself accountable because like you said earlier, no one's going to come put you on the map and tell you to do it unless you have a coach or something like that. But no one's going to be a bigger cheerleader for your life than you. So if you can't hold yourself accountable,
they fucking can't. You can't allow people to be.
Exactly, because then you're asking for permission, right? In some way, shape, or form. It's like a certain vibe of that. And so if you can hold yourself accountable and just repeat that process, right? And yours is extremely similar. Either of these processes, they're really saying the same thing. How do you take something from a concept and actually put it into action? And that's the process of really alchemy, if you think about it, right? Like alchemy is this process of creating something from something else, right? Or turning something into something else. And if you think about it in the alchemical structure, it's turning lead to gold, right? Which is essentially like taking this heavier state, turning it into a lighter state. But you can do that with anything. You can take it from an intention into an idea and then bring it down. And that's what manifestation is. It sounds super woo-woo, but there's actually some pretty concrete science behind this of how these things work. But again, a lot of the times people just label it as woo-woo, so they don't actually have to dive into it and they just write it off because people love to compartmentalize things. That's what the mind loves to do.
I bet let's just give it 6 months and then like, if you're not into it, fucking keep doing what you're doing.
Exactly.
Man, I always, even that fear of, so one of the questions I have for you, man, was there any moment or anything that kind of triggered your midlife change up?
Yeah, 100%. So there was a couple and I'll go into them. So the first one was, actually I've had a couple more than a couple. So I'll kind of give them all in a context of a line here. And so the first one was, I got diagnosed with anxiety. And all the pharmaceuticals I tried at 16 just were not working. And I was taking the Nancy Reagan approach and saying no to cannabis.
Man,
and my friend,
there's a quick pause. At what point can we quit? If you're telling me cannabis is bad for a brain under the age of 25, like what the fuck are we doing with antipsychotic medication and fucking...
Exactly. That's the thing. It's like, listen, at the end of the day, oxygen hurts us. So at the end of the day, we're all going to get affected by things, but what can help our experience of life be more great and grand in nature? That's what I always talk about. It's like, yeah, water could kill you. If you're drinking water with BPA in it, you're poisoning yourself, right? Like there's all these things, but what's the reason behind it, right? Like if you can interact with cannabis, something that may, right, give you carcinogens in your lungs or something, but you can benefit from that and get this whole epiphany moment and then have a much higher quality of life as a result. Well, that's the juice being worth the squeeze.
My friend, old age is not what's going to get me.
Yeah. You're taking the Hunter S. Thompson approach, to slide sideways.
Hopefully not quite that drastic. But yeah, man, like, nah. Like whenever the things go fucking dark and the DMT drip starts, I plan on the ride being a fucking good second run through.
100%. And death is just what I believe anyway, is death is just a new beginning into another realm and another story.
Yeah, we don't fucking know.
Exactly. We don't know. It's
You
the
know what I
mystery.
mean? We don't fucking know. I mean, what I hope it is, right? As I hope this is the stretch of time my energy got to have a physical form.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Hopefully, maybe I get to run it again. I don't know. But I'm not banking on anything other than as of today, I have one fucking less day to be alive.
Yep.
That's it.
100%.
And so whether I fall into fucking line or I have the awareness or I stay in all the rules or I judge and live in scarcity or fear or I find people and live in love, gonna fucking die. The outcome, the end of this story is exactly the fucking same.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no risk to trying anything, like, and more experience the better. Like, at what point is it been beneficial for people historically to have less options and less experience?
I mean, we can see that people have options to have all these experiences, right? But a lot of them are not leading to any good outcomes, right?
It's easier to watch other people do it.
Yeah, exactly. And so for me, it was like finding cannabis when I had anxiety or when I was experiencing anxiety. Because let's talk about that language shift. I didn't have anxiety. I was experiencing anxiety. And there was a recent study that came out that depression is not linked to a chemical imbalance. So what is that? You don't have depression. You're experiencing it. And I don't mean it. I mean, if I trigger people with that, so be it, right? Maybe there's something there for you to look into. But I know
I back you on that, dude, because listen, perception is your reality. Either glass half, glass empty, right? Like, that perception is still true either way you look at it. And if that's truthful, that perception is the reality I live in, the better I control my perception, I can fucking build my reality. It's a real simple fucking math equation.
Mm-hmm. 100%.
So, yeah.
And that's why
those things.
Yeah. And that's why, like, if someone doesn't want to believe it, cool. If you want to live in
right, I don't give a fuck. I'm the one who's not having to deal with anxiety anymore.
Exactly. Because I chose to believe that it was a shade of my experience. Right. It's not the background color on my desktop, that it was always going to be there, that was unchangeable. And so for me, when I got into cannabis, I found this beautiful, ability to realize that I was not my thoughts, and therefore had the direct experience that I don't have anxiety. I'm experiencing it. And who is experiencing it is the actual real self. And there's something else that plays the role of my real self that's not actually me. Now, I didn't say it in that language when I had the experience. I just
sure.
Right? Yeah, looking back, that's what happened. I was 16, but
didn't wrap that one up.
Yeah, I didn't wrap that one up that nicely then. But looking back in hindsight, because I've had more of these experiences, right? Like, I can describe it as that now. But then I got into interacting with it a lot because I was numbing out some things I just didn't know better. Like many people I imagine listening, like, oh yeah, you can resonate, right? We never got a user manual for this, so we're just
typical stoner fucking pothead, right? Not only that, like, if you have a perception that that's what it'll turn you into,
guess what?
There you go.
You just spelled yourself. You now just cast a spell on your own experience of life with your language or with your belief system. And a lot of times that comes, like we talked about, from someone else's spell. So they've got spelled and they're spelling you from a spell that was cast generations back. It's fucking weird, right? Whoever said that life wasn't a psychedelic experience? Because it fucking is, man. And when you get that realization, that changes a lot too. Because this is a fucking very interesting simulation that we go through, or whatever it is. But for me, when I had this experience of interacting with more and more of it, I was fine at that moment. I didn't feel like, this was a challenge in my life or anything. And then I woke up one morning and started pissing blood. Had no fucking clue why. And at that point, I wasn't healthy. I mean, I was eating like DiGiorno pizzas and doing what most 18-year-olds do, right? I was in school for psychology now and working a job. And so I was just making what I could on the run and not drinking water and smoking cigarettes and drinking alcohol on the weekends and these kind of things, which, again, no judgment, just for me.
That's why we're indestructible at that age, buddy.
Yeah, exactly. But
your body gives you a grace period to fucking sort it out before it's like, all right, guess what? Hangovers are fucking awful.
Yeah, there are repercussions for your actions. There are consequences.
And so I had a grace period.
Yeah. And so I had that experience when I was 18. I had that mortality crisis where woke up, was pissing blood. And I always forget to tell people what the actual challenge was here. It was a benign cyst in my kidney that broke open. It was, it was non-cancerous, thank God. But at the same time, it made me realize, like, what the fuck? Why are benign cysts growing on my kidneys? And like, what can I do to fix this? So I started having that experience of looking into everything I was interacting with, the food, the water, the people, my belief systems, everything. But I didn't have the resources that I do now, which is one of the reasons I'm so big on people having coaches, because I went through a lot of time and costly mistakes and things like that to hopefully be able to make some mistakes that other people won't have to make. Doesn't mean they won't make mistakes, right? Because I think mistakes are part of the journey. It's how you learn, but they can at least like gain from whatever wisdom they get from me and continue moving forward, right? And not have to make the same mistakes. They'll make different ones and they'll have the structure to move through them, but they don't have to make the same ones, right? And so for me, when I started to get into all this, I started exercising, I started getting my life in order, and I started going to cannabis school at the same time because I went to the Boston Freedom Rally that year and was, there walking around and heard someone yelling, "Who wants to make butter with me?" Walked over to this guy's little canopy and he's giving out this pamphlet that says they're opening a cannabis institute 5 minutes from my house. And that was one of the first moments I remember having like that fuck yes feeling from like a deep place within me that was undistinguishable, that I just had to do this. So I went home and told my dad, "Hey, I want to do this." And a little bit back up too that I forgot. My father was not a supporter or against cannabis. He was like, just say no.
DEA officer.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I went to the hospital with him, when I had that mortality crisis, he asked me, "Are you doing drugs?" And I said, "No, but I am interacting with a lot of cannabis." And so he had a sigh of relief, which was interesting. So when we went to the hospital, I started showing him a lot of the research I've been doing. And he actually became a proponent of it. He was like, "Oh, if this is helping you and this is what you use to move through anxiety, then I'm down for this. Like, you have responsibilities you're fulfilling. You're in school.
What a fucking lucky draw there with your dad being fucking reasonable and him not being locked into some other bullshit."
Yeah. And he had his own experiences, but he didn't put those on me, which was really powerful because my dad wasn't like the most spiritual person. When I look back at him, I'm like, actually, kind of fucking was. He just didn't walk around saying, "Oh, all the woo-woo terms and stuff like that," which is fine. Again, like however you want to express it is fine. But it was just interesting. The package didn't fit the actual contents was kind of what it felt like. And so for, when we were in the hospital, we bonded over that. And so when I go home and I tell him about the school, he goes, "I'll do one better. I'll purchase your spot and I'll purchase a spot too, because I'm curious about it. I want to go too." So he wasn't interacting with cannabis at this point, but we go together and we had this beautiful experience over a couple of years of learning together. And he was just nerding out. He always wanted to be a part of what I was doing. He would take me to metal shows and probably like cringe in the background when I was a kid. So game recognized game dad. And so in 2014, I was now working for the school. I just realized I'm like, this is what I want to do. But there was no industry really at that point yet. Like medical had passed, but there was no dispensaries yet, yada, yada. So I go to Las Vegas for a music festival and I connect with MDMA for the first time. Mm-hmm. And I'd done a lot of research on it because I still was in kind of like the wave of like, well, cannabis, yeah, it's safe, but I don't know about all the other things. Now, what I realized was that it wasn't that I was lied to about them, because you can do harm with MDMA, right? It's not like it's quote safe, but it's not that it's objectively bad for you, right? Like
you can do harm with cheeseburgers.
Exactly. And so like I realized, oh, okay, I'm going to try this too. And so I'd done a lot of research, heart opener, yada, yada. I wasn't super spiritual at that point, but I had an idea of what would happen. So I'm in the crowd seeing Base Nectar and like 50,000 people rolling for the first time. And I feel this unbelievable connection to my dad. Now, I figured, well, we're in Vegas. My dad loves gambling. So he was like a healthy gambler. You go a couple times a year.
Yeah, look, it can be fun. It's not everyone's the same way smoking weed.
Yeah, exactly. Like
you're allowed to have fucking vices, man.
Yeah, exactly. That's part of it here. And so I figured, I'm like, well, I'm in Vegas. That's the Mecca. I know he loves this place. And also we're going to a lot of steakhouses, and that's my dad and I's tradition. So I chalked it up as that. I wrote it off. I get home, and 9 days later, he tells me he was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And so when we were at the school, we were meeting a lot of patients who were curing their own cancer with RSO, Rick Simpson oil, or the other name for it is FICO, full extract cannabis oil. Now, I say this in every podcast I mention this in. A lot of your listeners might, if this is the first time they're hearing it, go, "Oh, here's what I was looking for." The moment where he says that cannabis is a panacea. And that's not what I'm saying. Now, what I will say is that for anyone who discredits what I just said, there are PubMed studies on PubMed that show THC killing cancer cells and CBD inhibiting their growth. Yet I am not saying that if you get cancer from, like my dad, smoking cigarettes, drinking soda, just living an unhealthy lifestyle, that you can just continue living that way and eat cannabis and everything will be fine. That's not what's going to happen. And it's not what happened to my dad, because my father was not someone who was going to change his way of living. And so I had a choice to make. Do I love my father for the person he is, for the person that's always shown me love, the person that supported me, the person that's raised me and allowed me to become who I really am? Or do I decide to make him into the version of him that I believe he should be, so that I can fit the narrative of my story that it shouldn't be right now, it wasn't supposed to happen this way, and all of that? And so I chose the first way because when I waited, I was like, well, one way, yes, he's probably going to die, but I'm going to have closure and I'm going to know that he went out with his dignity and the way he wanted to go out, allowing him to be sovereign. The other way, right, if I try to make him the way that I think he should be and he doesn't survive, well, then I'm going to have all this shit around me about this grief around my father, like not taking him for who he was and trying to mold him into the version of him I thought he should be. So I chose to let him live his life. And after a couple of weeks, he had still never interacted with cannabis at this point, right? All the way up until now. And he decided to not take treatment because he like chemo and radiation, because he had just finished up a 3-year stint of bringing his brother every single week to Dana-Farber for chemo and radiation. So he had seen what it had done to him. And he was like, fuck that. And so we got to have a serious conversation where he was like, listen, Rye, I'm not going to stop living the way I want to live. And I want you to respect that. And I was like, okay. So then at that point, it became, how do I increase my dad's quality of life and have the best time with him while he's still here? And so for me, after a couple of weeks, he started experiencing some severe pain. And so I started mentioning to him, let's get you on RSO, right? Like, let's just see what happens. And so I got him on RSO. And I would sit with him while he was going through these experiences, because here's someone who's really never interacted with cannabis. And now I'm giving them like the most powerful form of cannabis on planet Earth.
So like
right?
what type of dosage of THC would you say?
Well, the goal, how you start RSO, especially for cancer, is the goal is to get to 1 gram a day, which is around 1,000 milligrams
Let's
as fast as possible.
go.
Right. So that's like,
oh, damn. Like, all right.
So everything I've said, right? I imagine people can get the drift that I know a little bit about cannabis, or I think I know a little bit about cannabis. Anyway. I've done some work in this realm.
I wouldn't fucking have you on.
Yeah. It's like, I take 25 milligrams, right? So 1,000 is fucking crazy, even for me.
Crazy.
Yeah. And so like for him, we were starting him around 0.1, 100, and he would be like wrecked, and he didn't like the feeling, right? But at the same time, it took his pain away. And very similar to what you were saying in the beginning, it's not like it removes your pain like an opiate does. It dissociates you from the pain. So it's almost like the pain is in the corner of the room, but you get to now be in the other corner of the room. So it changes the vantage point on it.
Yes, that's a fucking beautiful way to say it. Like, and I dealt with chronic pain for 3 years.
Yeah. And it's like, when you understand it that way, it puts it in context too. Because again, it doesn't take your pain away for you, but it removes you from the pain for a little bit, if that makes sense, you know? And so for him, when he was going through this, I would sit with him and I got to hear stories that I had never heard from him before about his childhood, about what really mattered to him, about how he thought about himself, like all these things, and got to help him shift some of these stories around, like, you know, him thinking that he was a failure because his business didn't work out when the recession happened. And like these kind of things that, you know, were things that were plaguing him, right? Part of probably the reason that he ended up with cancer, right? Because all these things were just bubbling over in him. And I got to support him in just holding space and hearing these things that he would have died with otherwise, right? So he didn't get to leave them on the table. He actually like put them on the table, right? And so for me, like, you know, having these experiences and watching him have closure with his grandchildren, his other children, my mother, and most importantly, his own mortality, you know, like getting to take the heaviness out of death, you know, like getting to talk to my father. And instead of it being this like, oh, you're the sick guy and I'm the one taking care of the sick guy, it was like, in a way, it was like he was graduating, and it was exciting. And it was like this, like, wow, what do you think happens from here? Like, this is just the beginning of a whole new adventure. And so having those experiences really allowed me to see the power of cannabis as this connection medicine and as this thing that can help support the human experience at such a deep, profound level. Or it can be simply the thing that allows you to relax after a long day of work. Like, it has such a range of depth to it. And I'm not saying that other medicines don't, but what I find with cannabis is that if you choose to believe, like I do, that we're infinite beings, right? And we're souls having a human experience, and that we never die, really, right? We might change our hermit shell crab, right? But at the end of the day, you know, we're not actually dying. Then we have infinity to be there, wherever there is, home, God, whatever you want to call it. We have a microdose of being in a 3D reality and having a physical experience. So for me, I want things that connect me more to the experience of being a human, to my emotions, ups and downs, right? The messiness, all of that, because it's all beautiful when you view it like that. And so with my dad, I had this experience of like, holy shit, cannabis is the only medicine I found that connects you more to the sensory realm while still giving you the microdose of that like bigger picture of like, whoa, everything is fine. We're all just at Disneyland. We're all going to see everyone when we go home, right? It's all fine. It allows you to microdose that, but not be so far gone in the spirit realm that it takes you a long time to integrate back into the human experience and lose some of this 100 to 150 years we get if we're lucky. And so when I had that experience, not only did all that happen, but my dad never told me when he was diagnosed that he had 2 months to live, right? He had small cell carcinoma. It was all throughout his body when they found it. He had frontal lobe cancer. Like there was a lot of stuff going on that he just didn't tell me. And so he ended up lasting a full year past that original date. And I can't say that I know for sure that that was cannabis that allowed me to get that time, but it's a very strong correlation based on the scans he was getting back that showed his cancer very, very slowly growing based on like, I mean, it obviously got into a very strong point before we started cannabis and things were slowing down. We were having the doctors ask like, what the hell are you guys doing? Right. So those experiences allowed me to have closure with my dad. And when I look at that experience, yes, it's painful. Yes, I still feel emotion for it, but I know it happened for me. And I know that like he's in an amazing place. And it's like my foundation of that experience is positive in nature, not because it's objectively positive, but because I choose to view it that way. And that, like, just that, knowing that, like, yes, my dad is gone from this realm and I'm okay with that. It's not that it doesn't hurt me. It's not that I don't feel the emotion behind it, but I'm okay with it. Like, think about what that could do, just that one thing for so many people. And again, cannabis isn't the only way, but it's definitely a way. And if I can help other people tap into that immense amount of connection and closure and gratitude for the experience of life from birth to death, I mean, that is like what fires me up on all cylinders. And so after that, I ended up getting into the industry with all that passion. And I ended up going through and working with over 5,000 medical patients. And then at a certain point, our place got taken over by a corporation, which at first I was like, woe is me, this is terrible. But I thank that corporation so much because it triggered me so much that I had no other option but to leave. And so I had that awakening point when I was 16 and found cannabis. I had that midlife crisis or awakening point or midlife ignition when I had my mortality crisis. I had it when my father passed away. I had it when I left the dispensary, and how that happened was another MDMA experience where here I was in the industry. I'd had all these experiences and I was interacting with cannabis once per night in a volcano vaporizer. I was growing all my own cannabis. It was organic. I was checking all the boxes. My house was in order. I had the diet. I had everything. But when I went to Vegas and I did MDMA out there, this is a different story now. I went out there for a big cannabis convention to find my own investors with my girlfriend who I met at the dispensary. So we went out there as entrepreneurs, like, let's find our own investors. Let's bring love grown cannabis to the world. Let's start teaching people about organic and why it's important. We go out there and we met a lot of suit and tie people, just more of the same we had back home, which was like, how many grams per square foot can you get me? What's the
numbers?
You can do it exactly.
No one wants the fucking soul, dude.
Yeah. And so the last night we were there, we were both kind of somber. And I asked her, I said, what do you want to do? It's our last night here. And she goes, could we take Molly and go to a strip club? And I had never been to a strip club, which probably makes me sound super innocent, but neither is she. So we're like, fuck it, let's go. We had a fucking blast.
Yep.
Talked to the strippers, had an absolute blast time, just amazing experience. And I was keeping track of time, and I fucked up and lost track of time. So we left at like 8 a.m, right? And we were just having a good time. And we were supposed to leave at like 4 because Rachel was working on a big Chicago, Illinois dispensary application. You want to talk office supplies and like, I'll take no for 500, please. It's writing a 600-page application for legal and accounting and all that shit. So she was doing that. And I watched her in this moment, leaving the strip club, going through this feeling in her body of like, oh my God, how am I going to do it? How am I going to finish it? And in that moment, I empathized with her and I felt her low. And I realized that since my dad had passed, I hadn't allowed myself to be still enough to feel low. And I had been numbing out my emotions with cannabis every night so that I didn't have to actually face the fact that my job was not in alignment with me anymore, that I was going to have to go out on my own and pave my own path. And that was terrifying because I was seeking validation from everyone around me. All these things just hit me like a ton of bricks at once. And I was like, oh, fuck. And once Pandora's box is opened, it doesn't go back. Right. And so I went home from that trip, literally on the plane, pounding migraine, 3 hours of sleep in a bliss state because I was like, I'm feeling feelings again. I went home and I took a 3-month break from cannabis. And at that point, I still had that belief of like, oh shit, this is cannabis that did this to me. And then about a month in, I realized, no, this is a me thing. Because now I had illuminated enough from not numbing out that I realized, oh, this is me. And this is what I learned and all the stuff. And so from there, I started pouring out of my heart. My heart started turning back on. All these things started turning on. I started being more process oriented than goal oriented. And so I started just pouring my heart out on Facebook about just random things like perspective and what, I don't know, I think about it in this moment. And in that like just like fury of posting these things, I ended up someone ended up hitting me up and was like, hey, that language stuff you talk about is really cool. Where'd you hear that? So I was a podcast junkie, still am. And I had heard like 3 years prior, this guy, Mark England, on a podcast called Positive Head, talking all about language and how language creates a reality. So I tagged Mark in the comments. An hour later, he hits me up, goes, hey, man, we should hop on a call. I really like what you're saying. So I go, okay. I hop on a call and he's like, hey, have you ever thought about being a coach? Now, I didn't know what the fuck he meant. Being a soccer coach, I was going to teach Bulgarian split squats. I'm like, what do you mean? So I just had this feeling of saying yes. And at that point, I only had about $2,700, maybe $3,000 left in my bank account. And I knew I wanted to leave the job. All of this was just hitting me at the same time. So I just knew I wanted to say yes. So I just said fucking yes. And I figured it out. And I joined this program. And a month later, the pandemic hits. And I'm able to somehow, like through a series of fortunate events, collect unemployment from the job because we had to shut down, make as much money as I was when I was working, and now dedicate myself. I had all this time now. And now I'm starting this coaching thing. And so I get into coaching. I start having all these experiences and start like really diving into this and be like, oh my God, this is all my psychology stuff coming back around. Oh my God, I can take cannabis and put this in there. And I can take my experience I just had and start doing it. So then in about August, this was like in January, in August, Mark invites me down to his lake house. And he goes, in true Mark England fashion, if you ever, I'll have to get him on the show. You'd love him. He goes, hey man, bunch of guys are coming down to the lake house. It's a men's weekend. I'm not taking no for an answer. So let me know when you're flying in and I'll come pick you up. So I'm like, okay. So I fly down there. I meet a bunch of people who at that point were Zoom icons to me. I start being in the network of all these coaches and people that are like just so hell-bent on self-development and all the stuff and mysteries and psychedelics and all this stuff, right? And my friends at home were into a lot of the stuff, but it was just a different, like more business-oriented thing and also really fun too.
Yep.
So when I'm there, I meet a guy, Chris Marhefka, who's like, hey, I'm hosting a men's retreat in Colorado in 2 weeks. You should come. I'm like, okay. So I go to that thing. Then I meet someone else who's like, I'm going to Mexico for 6 weeks. You should come. And I just start saying yes for the next 2.5 years. And it's still happening right now. Right now, I'm in Richmond, Virginia. And in 2 days, I'm heading over to Mark's house for the next Lake House Chronicles. And so like my whole life that I have now, even though I'm in darkness right now, I'm still here, guys. But
yeah, right.
I didn't think to turn on the lights. But you know, it's like my whole life now was from saying yes to my heart. I have no fucking clue. I would have never thought that any of this stuff would have happened if I didn't just say yes to my heart. Was it scary? Is it still scary? Fuck yeah. But like we were saying earlier, what I've done is translated being scared into being alive and feeling.
Well, that's it, man. That fucking anxiety that people have, that fear thing. Yo, it means you fucking give a shit.
Yeah, it does.
It means you give a shit about the outcome. So fucking let's go.
Yeah, it means you're not.
Get away from the stuff that doesn't give you that feeling. That fucking feeling is the direction to point the fucking compass at.
Yeah, nihilism is no fun.
I'll wrap up, man. And your story about your dad has hit home. My father passed away in 2014, pancreatic cancer.
I'm sorry. My dad was 2015, so right around the same time.
You know, and for me, luckily I had dove into a lot of things by then, as far as my own perspective on a lot of things. And so I was able to hold space with him, and I was frustrated that like he wouldn't try anything.
Yeah.
Because to me, I'm like, you're fucking dying. You won't, like, what's the risk? like we know the fucking outcome here.
Yeah. The odds are pretty good. There's going to be a positive thing.
And man, that experience that you got to have with your dad and got to watch him have closure and do all that, and even the slowing of the cancer growth. And I mean, like, I don't even give a fuck if I want to say the reason that cancer, it's not, maybe the cannabis isn't why it slowed down. Perhaps it is because of what he unburdened.
Yeah, 100%. And we'll never know for sure. But at the end of the day, it was from those experiences, whatever it was from that, there was something that clicked on in him that told him, I want to be here a little bit longer. And he didn't feel as disempowered. And when he made that decision, he lasted longer. And it was like the perfect amount of time to finish everything, all the loose ends he had. And then he passed on, and he got to do it at home with his family around him, with me around him, with my mom around him. And like those kind of things to me allow me to sit into like my dad passed away and moved on and graduated in the way he wanted to grow, in the way he wanted to go, in the place he wanted to go. And so the best thing we were able to do for him is give him his freedom when he went out. Is there anything better we can give someone else than their freedom to make their own choices in life? I mean, fuck, that's what life's about.
Yeah. My story went a little different. But, yeah, dude. How fucking cool. You know I have a pretty good feeling of what my dad's response to a lot of those deeper questions would be, but I wish I didn't have to guess.
Well, one thing that I choose to believe, right? And maybe we'll have to go do a journey together someday. My good buddy Hamilton Souther. Dude, I met this guy Hamilton Souther recently. I'd love to get him on your show. You will fucking love this guy. He's a true ayahuasquero. He owns Blue Morpho down in Peru. And we've talked a lot about the idea of mediumship with medicines, and you have to be really careful, of course. That's why I'm doing it with him, because you never know who you're letting in. You got to have good psychic boundaries. But we're planning on having a ceremony where I'm going to contact my father. And so, and for people listening, if you want to say, oh, it's just your mind doing it, cool, whatever. I don't care. Fine. I want to speak to who I believe is my father.
In the words of Dumbledore, why would that make any difference?
Exactly. And so like, I think that there are ways that we can, gain some sense of closure even after someone has passed on from this realm. And I'd love to explore that with you, because I'm always curious. Like,
yeah, I would same, man. Same. With all my psychedelic experience, I keep waiting for this interaction.
Yeah.
To come, and it hasn't been.
Yeah.
And the only thing I can take from that, right, is one of the trust I have with the medicine of any sort is it gives me what I need, not what I want. So clearly I don't have anything there that maybe needs sorting out.
Yeah, that's a really good way to look at it. The one thing I had heard that I kind of liked as like a theory was, imagine if we are like, imagine a human being, right? Just imagine how you are right now. And then imagine like the end of your pinky nail, right? So if we are all reflections of one another, walking each other home, and we're all source having a human experience, and we all come from that same source, then imagine the source, God, is that human being, and us being like the tip of that little fingernail. So when your dad goes home and he's that whole person again, how much is he going to notice a little tickle from his pinky finger, right? Because he knows, that everything's a happy day on the other side. And this is just my theory here that I've taken from someone else, but that helped me a lot too, because it was like, oh, if they don't come through every time, they either maybe didn't hear it, or they're just like, you're fine. Like right now you need to be on your own, and I'll come through at the perfect moment. And how my dad comes through, that I'm curious if this spawns anything, is my dad comes through, it's never in like the 5-MeO experiences where I think I'm going to get like this beautiful message from him. It's like when I go to breakfast and all of a sudden I want what he wanted. And it's not like this logical thing of like, oh, I'm going to get what my dad wanted to remind me of him. It's just like, oh, I'm really craving Eggs Benedict. And I'm like, wait, I didn't even like Eggs Benedict. And this is what started happening to me. And then like, on the very rare occasion I get ice cream, me and him used to get ice cream all the time when I was growing up, and he'd always get a strawberry sundae with chocolate ice cream, whipped cream, and nuts. And now all I fucking want when I go to these places is that ice cream. So whether or not someone wants to say that that's just you tuning into that, whatever, I don't fucking care, because it's real to me. Sure. And that's all that matters. And so I'm curious if your dad comes through in those kind of ways, because that's how I notice it the most.
There's little stuff, right? There's the stuff that like, I know got passed down. And those type of things, I look at those, there's fucking good and bad.
Yeah,
they came with it. It isn't all wonderful benefit. A lot of it's taken a lot of rewiring of just the emotional pattern of how I handle stress and problems, from being something that is a fuck panic.
Yeah,
this is out of control, to now like, ooh, a challenge.
Yes.
But there's so many good traits that I know got passed down to me. Like one of the things I really believe about my father that I loved was that I always considered him a very capable man. He could weld, he could fix things, he could do. I don't know really what a level of emotional intelligence was there. It just wasn't ever spoke of. But I know that I was very loved, and I know that he gave a shit.
Yeah.
And so those things, like I'll carry those torches. I'll carry the fucking torches I want, but it's my job to also be an improvement on the fucking model.
100%.
And I fucking look like him. Like there's a ton there. And so like, I know as he didn't take care of himself, Motherfucker, this is what it looks like.
Yeah.
You don't want that. So don't make those decisions.
You know, one of the most powerful things my coach ever said to me was, you know, we were talking about the story of my father dying, and he goes, hey, so like we were going over different things, and, you know, we looked at some of the things that he was asking me, like, what do you think your dad, you know, had challenges with as he was getting closer to death, right? What were the things he started talking about?